Welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. I'm your host, Timothy Regal. Here with me today, I have Noah Revoy. Noah is a life, love, relationship, and business coach. He's a co-author of the book, Reprogram Your Life, Your Pathway to Agency. He specializes in helping men and women improve themselves, find success in dating and marriage, and helps businesses thrive. Noah, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate being invited.
We hear a lot today about life coaches. There's kind of this whole even corner of Twitter that you and I are a part of where there's a lot of guys doing coaching. You hear about it now in a lot of self-improvement aspects, and people have written books and everything. I'm a porn addiction coach. What is coaching? Why do people need a coach? What are the benefits of it?
Well, we live in the most underfathered generation or time in history. People don't have that older masculine mentor network that we used to have throughout history. So your father, your grandfather, your uncles, this type of thing to go to help you to develop as a man. And for women, actually, often going also to the same men or going to your mother and your aunts to develop your skills and to ask questions. And we've become very atomized. We're all alone. There's no one to get help from. There's no one to talk to. And often we kind of know what we should be doing. But if we don't have a chance to talk about it with people, it doesn't get normalized. And when we go to talk about it with our friends, we find that they have been programmed to give a certain set of answers to our questions because they feel that that's the right answer to give. You know, they may not even agree with the thing they're saying. They just think that's what they're supposed to say. So we tend to not get very good advice from our peers. And what's happening is some of the mature men and women in society are stepping up and saying, look, you need help. I don't know you. You're not part of my social group. So if you want help, hire me as a coach. And I can give you that fathering, that mentorship, that guidance that you never got in your life. And, you know, it doesn't matter what age you are. You can be in your 60s. You still need to be able to talk to someone about your problems and try to have someone that tries to help you work it out, that helps you learn, or not learn, but helps you to think through a problem in a way that gets a solution better than you could get on your own. That's basically what a coach is. If you're training for a physical event, you know, everyone that is an athlete, the pro athlete, they all have coaches. Why? Because a coach enables them to be more effective and productive in their training and in their performance than they could ever be on their own. You know, the coach isn't necessarily the fastest and strongest. He's the one that's able to get them to be their fastest and strongest. And that's what a coach does in other areas of life too. It helps you to accomplish things that you couldn't accomplish on your own.
You touch on an interesting point there where there's a relationship where there are not necessarily any strings attached. So there's no interpersonal dynamics or anything necessarily that could hinder someone expressing what they really need to express, and then the coach saying what they really need to say. I tell the guys that I coach, you know, I'm your friend, yes, but I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. I'm going to lift you up when you're feeling down. If you're feeling sorry about yourself, I'm going to encourage you. Yeah, I might give you, a kick in the ass every once in a while if you need it too. But I'm able to say things that people need to hear, but not necessarily want to hear.
This is especially important. A lot of people think that you go to, coaching because there's something wrong with you and you're going to get it fixed. It's not really what it is. The most successful people are more likely to have coaches. And it's not that they get coaches and became successful. It's a mix of both. Their success is partly due to the fact they seek out coaching and mentoring, but they seek out coaching and mentoring partly because they're successful and now they're at a level in their life where the next step isn't clear always. And I do coaching for, young men who are trying to figure out basics. And it's, very similar from one guy to the other, what you do. But I also coach highly successful, very wealthy men and women on complex issues of personal relationships and parenting and, how to run their business in a way where, businesses are mostly about relationships. You can't run a business where everyone hates each other inside. That doesn't work.
Mhm.
There has to be a functional relationship. They don't have to like each other, but there has to be a functional relationship there between people and between suppliers and clients and all of that. I help people with that. And actually, I get the most traction or the best results with people who are already very successful. If I make you 10% more effective and you're only here, then that's this. If I make you 10% more effective when you're here, then that's a huge jump. It's a huge leap. And so the more successful you are, the more imperative it is that you have at least one coach and mentor. And I have clients that have 2 or 3 different coaches and mentors for different aspects of their life. People that are a coach for, say, their financial management, and others like myself that coach their relationships. And then I have someone, that they have a physical education coach. And I'm a fairly strong guy. I know how to look after my own health, but I don't pretend to be a physical education coach because that's not my area. It's not my expertise. And so look for the coaches in the areas you need help. And really, the more successful you are, the more you're going to get out of it.
So what separates a coach from, let's say, a therapist or a counselor or someone like that?
Well, first of all, a therapist is someone in general. I think in the UK, you don't need to have any special degree. But in general, a therapist or a psychologist, this type of a person, they have gotten a set of curriculum and education that they've been given. And so they're all trained relatively the same. They need to fit into this box. And they need to be able to get a license from the government. So they get permission from the government to tell you things. So they can only tell you what the government gave them permission to tell you. So if you really deeply trust your government and believe that they have your best interests at heart, that's not such a big problem. But I have never in my life seen so little trust in government and in institutions as I see right now. And so I'm not saying that the therapists are bad people. There are a lot of good people who are therapists, and many of them are very frustrated at being limited by this fence around what they can do. It keeps them from being creative. It keeps them sometimes from telling clients what those clients need to hear. And when they try to do it, they put their jobs and their career at risk. And I know a lot of therapists in the last 2-3 years alone who have just left their therapy practice and said, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to become a coach, because it gave them the freedom to be completely honest with people and to use what works rather than what has been prescribed by their governing body of their profession.
Something I found through my coaching is, and one reason some people have chosen to do coaching with me versus going to counseling or some sort of therapy, is they don't want to be diagnosed. They don't want to have a shrink, and they just need someone to walk alongside them. You mentioned earlier about the need for that fathers, the need for those friendships, and the need for that fraternal bond and support that is missing so much in society today. I'm able to come alongside and say, hey man, I don't have a bunch of letters behind my name. I'm not trying to shrink you. I'm not trying to diagnose you or tell you there's something wrong with you. You're not necessarily, a lot of people don't need some sort of clinical diagnosis. And I think, as you mentioned, where the government controls everything, they're trying to give everybody a label and give them some sort of disease or disorder or whatever, when that's not necessarily what they have or necessarily what they need. Sometimes they just need someone who's been through what they've been through to come alongside them, to love them, support them, encourage them, and help them get to where they want to be.
Yeah, labels are given for the purpose of control. You label them, now you can control them, you can categorize them. And this is especially true as we move towards a government that's basically run by artificial intelligence-like systems. Mm-hmm. If you're not labeled, where do you fit in the system? How do they control you? Healthy is not a label. You don't make any money off someone who's labeled as there's nothing wrong with him. And so they have to find something wrong with you, so they have something to treat, because that's the paradigm in which they operate. I have had politicians as clients. I have had political celebrities as clients. I've had actors and actresses as clients, musicians and other people like this who have names that people would know. And they've come to me specifically saying that I can't go to a therapist because even though there's the therapy client privilege, some of the things I need to talk about, I'm afraid that it's going to get out and destroy my reputation. And I don't operate the same way. I don't work for the government. They have no leverage over me. And, years ago, I was a minister and I took an oath that when people tell me their secrets, I would not reveal them. And I will not reveal what people tell me. I mean, you could torture me. I'm not going to reveal it. It's a lock vault. And the reason for that is that people need to be able to trust. Otherwise, they can't really reveal what they need to work on. And I've had people say to me, if I went to a therapist and I told them I was depressed, they'd come and take my guns away. That I'm not going to kill anybody. I'm not going to hurt myself. I've just had this depression and we work through it. If I wasn't there or another coach like me, they would have gone without help. And so a lot of times these reporting requirements from, government approved professions actually lead to people not going and getting the help that they need. And they end up harming people rather than helping them, which is not unusual. Every government program works the exact opposite as the way that they claim it was intended to work. So we can, it's kind of a constant governmental paradox. I call it the reverse Midas touch. Midas touches things and turns them to gold. They touch things and turn them to garbage. Touch it, boom, it's garbage, it's worthless. And so they've done that. They've really hampered therapists from doing their job. And I think it's been very hard. I did look at a couple years back about going to take a psychology course so that I could become a certified psychologist. And I looked at the syllabus of the course and I really dug into it deep. And at the end, I concluded that it would make me less effective at helping people because of the brainwashing that was involved in the course and the ideas in the course, which I knew don't work because I've actually been in the field. But if you're an 18-year-old going to a course like that, you don't know anything. You don't know anything about anything. Not that every 18-year-old's an idiot, but you don't know about the world because you haven't lived it yet. I'm in my mid 40s. I have a wife, almost 20 years married. I got 3 kids. I have done, check my Twitter feed. I've done some really interesting things. I can't even talk about some of the most interesting ones because other people are involved and I don't want them to get in trouble. I've done some really cool stuff. I've seen how the world works, and I've seen people destroy their lives, and I've seen people rebuild their lives, and I know what it takes to do both. And I can help people to do the rebuilding. I can help people no matter what situation you're in, build yourself up. And that's something an 18-year-old doesn't have experience with. And then they get indoctrinated into this system of, 80% of the time spent on diagnosis. Let's see where you fit in the broken spectrum.
And I think people are fearful of all those ulterior motives.
Yeah.
And government is obviously one of the biggest ones. And when you go to any sort of psychotherapy, there is almost that indoctrination now. They're pushing things that make no sense logically or biologically, honestly, naturally, anything. But in other areas as well, I think people are afraid of going to their pastor sometimes because they're worried about ulterior motives. They're afraid of going to a teacher at school because then X, Y, and Z is going to happen once they do that.
Try going to your therapist and telling him, I have a porn addiction and I need your help. And the therapist is going to go, there's no such thing as a porn addiction. It's real healthy. I know therapists that are good people that are really on the straight and narrow, but therapy itself is they're told to say that whatever you have of a sexual nature that is deviating from normal is just your choice and it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And if it bothers you, the fact it bothers you is what's the problem, not the fact that what you're doing is unnatural and unhealthy. And that's a completely backwards way to do medicine.
And you have a book coming out about manipulation, and we see a lot of this manipulation. They're not treating patients, they're not treating people who come to them necessarily from a honest standpoint. There's manipulation behind it. So talk about that a little bit and how we can remove that sort of manipulation from our lives.
Yeah, so manipulation is essentially the use of information and social cues and structures. It's weaponizing these things in order to control other people. It's social aggression, the same way that violence is physical aggression. Manipulation is social aggression. And most of us have been manipulated since birth. We were, most parents parent primarily with manipulation or violence. They either hit their kid or they manipulate them or both. And so we grow up on this, and then we go to school and there's more manipulation. Most churches manipulate their flock. Most institutions you get into you end up growing up, you participate in various programs. There's all manipulation throughout it. You get a job, it's all about manipulation. And what happens is we're so saturated by this that we can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not real, what we should and shouldn't do, what's actually good for us and what might harm us but benefit the manipulator. And we get stuck on this. And, going back to first foundations, guys like you and me, maybe we can go back to first foundations. We can start from the beginning. If you're a Christian, let me go read my Bible and see if that conforms with what I'm being taught at church. If you are being told something in health, you're healthy at every size. Well, that doesn't seem right, but let me go and check this out. And you could figure out what the healthy thing to do is. But the vast majority of the population is too afraid to do that. They're afraid, they are unskilled, they've been purposely poorly educated so that they can't tell the difference between a truth and a manipulation. And they're now in this point where just recently people are starting to wake up and say, I don't trust the official narrative. There's something wrong. I can't even put my finger on it. I just don't trust them. What I've done is I've written a book. It's in the final editing stages now. I've written a book which teaches you how to identify when you're being manipulated, what tools they're using to manipulate you, and how to protect yourself against it. And it really starts for the adult. It starts with getting rid of the self-manipulation. You're a quit porn coach. You help people with that, and most of the people that I know that have come to me for help with pornography addiction or any addiction, deep down inside, they kind of think it's okay. Even if they're coming to me for help, they obviously realize they need to stop. But they don't. They manipulate themselves into thinking they need it. And it's the same with people that overeat. I need this food as a reward. I need this to fill some hole inside me. So that's a spiritual, psychological hole, not a physical hole. It can't be fixed with food. I need this porn to make me feel loved or to give me attention, even though you're not getting attention, but it feels like you're getting attention or whatever it happens to be. There's a need that they feel that they need to fill with this unhealthy habit. And if we can get over that self-manipulation to say, this isn't fixing my problem, this isn't filling my need, this isn't satisfying me, and in fact is preventing me from getting satisfied, and we get over these manipulations, whatever they happen to be, as soon as you get over your self-manipulation, it becomes very difficult for other people to manipulate you because they usually use your own delusion to manipulate you. And if you don't lie to yourself, lies start becoming unpalatable. The Bible talks about the man who's lying. It's like rotten fish coming out of his mouth. It's disgusting when someone lies. And if we could see manipulation and lies as disgusting as they are, they would lose power over us. They wouldn't work. And what happens when you have a society where lying and manipulation are no longer effective tools for dealing with people? Well, you have two other options: violence, but we're actually pretty immune to violence. In most of the world, the general public has far more military potential than their own government. There's about roughly 350 civilians in Canada, for example, for every police and military combined. And not all police and military are shooters. A lot of them are just, mechanics and line cooks and stuff like that. So the general population is more physically powerful than the government. So governments have been using manipulation. What happens when that doesn't work anymore? Now they have to start using persuasion. When lies make no effect on us and only enrage people, they have to start resorting to telling the truth. And that happens in our personal relationships. That can happen in our business relationships. We can do the same thing. And people say, well, that can never happen at the level of government. There's just too much corruption there. Well, people said we couldn't fly. People said we couldn't land on the moon. People said we couldn't end slavery. People said we couldn't end child labor. There's been a lot of changes in human history that in hindsight were obvious and had to happen, but at the time looked like they were impossible. A population that in general is immune to manipulation is a population that their government has to deal with them honestly. And that changes everything. It's only really been since the event of mass media that government primarily used manipulation. Before that, it just wasn't very effective. It was really hard to get information out there for the purposes of manipulation. Now it's easy and cheap. We have to, we developed over centuries an immunity to violence by building up the martial class and the class within Western society capable of defending ourselves against our own governments. That took a long time. I think we're going to get to a point where we're immune to manipulation in my lifetime. And that changes everything, changes how we're going to parent our children. It changes how marriages are going to be sorted. The reality is going back to traditional biblical roles is removing the manipulation from the relationship. Christ didn't manipulate his followers, and the Bible says that you are to have a relationship with your wife like Christ with the congregation, as far as your executive relationship with your wife, how you manage the family and how you manage things. And I think we're going to see that in our lifetime, and I think it's going to change things in a way that is as amazing as the Industrial Revolution changed the world. It's going to really be a big difference. And I'm really looking forward to helping speed that along with the information that I'm releasing in my book.
How do you learn to tell the difference between manipulation and truth?
Yeah,
a lot of manipulation sounds like truth, and a lot of truth can even sound like manipulation. So how does one begin to differentiate between that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Most people are incapable of finding truth. So that's via positiva, picking the needle out of the haystack of lies that is truth. But most people have the capacity to identify a lie. So of all the information coming at you, you say, lie, lie, lie. I don't know about that one. That might be true. Okay, I'm going to put that in the pile of potentially true. That's the first step, is figuring out how the obvious lies are lies. And that means that we need to understand how lying works. We need to be able to falsify information. If someone makes a claim, how do we falsify it? And we need to make ourselves immune to what's called GSRRM. It's a series of tactics that manipulators use. It's gossiping, shaming, rallying, reputation destruction, and these type of things, that where people use these to make you willing to agree to a thing that you know isn't true, because if not, there's going to be consequences socially. And some of these things, shaming itself isn't bad. The problem is when it's weaponized against you. And it's the same way where we learn to differentiate between what is healthy for us or unhealthy for us in our diet. You eat something, I don't feel good when I eat that. Okay. You start to learn instinctually, when I follow these instructions, this doesn't turn out right. 100 years of government advice on how I should eat, and we keep getting fatter. I don't think I trust that source of information anymore. And you'll start noticing a pattern. The farther the individual is away from you, the less you can trust them. We can't trust government. There's no way to make government trustable. We always have to literally have a gun to their head to trust them, because they can't be made to be trustable, because the power is so far from us that we can't know them individually. Those who are close to us, we start to learn what's the reputation. If you have a liar in your midst, you will figure out that person's a liar. Once you stop manipulating yourself, outside external manipulations become very obvious. How you know that something's a lie is because you follow the eliminatory process, the via negativa. Does it make sense? Is it internally consistent? There's, I think, 7 different questions you have to ask. Is it internally consistent? Does it correspond with known information? I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. They're in the book. But these questions allow us to say, this thing is definitely not true. Now, it doesn't tell you something's true. It tells you it's a candidate for truth. If we could eliminate all the obvious lies, who believed that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Anyone that understood how the world works didn't think there was any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It worked on the people who were gullible, who didn't understand how the world works. But those gullible people, they didn't know they had to rely on their government for answers. But here's an easy way to answer that. I don't trust you. I don't trust your motives. I don't trust what you want to do. And you might be telling the truth, but since I don't trust you, I assume everything you say is a lie. If that was people's attitude towards government mandates and government advice, they would go a lot farther than they are with the de facto trust. Now, this is what it's like if you go to Poland or the Czech Republic and ask people, do you trust the government? No. Anywhere that lived under communism, you ask them, do you trust the government? Nope, not as far as we can throw them. Everything's propaganda. We don't believe anything. Because they ended up under the intense propaganda like 2 generations before we did. So they developed their immunity quicker. Manipulation's like a virus, and we can develop immunity to it. And if we don't, there will be consequences. Right now, if you look 200 years ago, if a nation wanted to defeat another nation, you had to physically kill the men in the other nation until they capitulated. Now you convince them to chop off their balls or shoot themselves or take so many drugs or watch so much porn and play so many video games that they're technically taken out. They're neutralized. How much cheaper is that? No risk to your soldiers, low cost, easy, clean, and you don't even get any blowback from it because nobody's going to blame you for doing it. They made choices. This is a survival pressure our ancestors didn't have. Pornography was not a problem 100 years ago. It existed, but it was so incredibly expensive that people just didn't have access to it. Drugs have always been a problem for quite a few years. Alcohol was always a problem. The control of these things, using them appropriately and responsibly. But we have never in history had to face such decadence down to the least wealthy person can live in decadence and luxury and decide to just crawl into their own manipulative world of delusions and essentially die. What's the result? Millions of people, maybe billions, are going to take themselves out of the gene pool. Men like you and I who are having kids, who are raising our children without any delusions, who aren't manipulating them, who are teaching them how to think, how to identify manipulation. My son, he hears something, goes, that's propaganda. He can identify it. And I said, why do you know? He says, because those two things can't both possibly be true. So there's a lie in there somewhere. He doesn't know the truth of the matter. He just is good enough to identify there is a lie. And right away, he writes off that source of information forever. He will never listen to that source again. It's a little difficult. He goes to a private school. It's a little difficult there. He's going to write off every teacher by the end of the year. But he writes off that potential source forever. If we are raising our kids that way, and our kids are the ones that have kids, it takes a couple of generations. And those who are not immune, just like under any viral situation, those who are not immune die off. Those who are immune survive. And that's what we're going to face over the next 2 or 3 generations. Surprisingly, their plan to manipulate us is going to completely backfire on them because in the end, nature always wins. And nature, whenever there's a pressure to survive, whoever's best at surviving is going to win, and we're going to win.
You have a program, a course, a book called Reprogram Your Life, Your Pathway to Agency. So is developing agency, and can you explain a little bit what agency is, but developing that agency part of making yourself immune to all that manipulation?
Well, the first, if you can identify something as a lie, that can tell you what not to do. With agency, what you're able to do is you're able to identify specific threats and specific opportunities and then act on them, whether that means to neutralize or avoid the threat or to capitalize on the opportunity. And so while one of them prevents you from making disastrous mistakes, the other one, that is agency, teaches you how to do something that will be positive. It's more the via positiva, how to go out and accomplish the things that you want. When Adam and Eve were released in the Garden of Eden, and God said, be fruitful and become many and subdue the earth, he was telling them, go and have agency and dominion over yourselves and over the world under my guidance. And what agency is having that dominion over yourself. So having control of your emotions, having control of your thoughts, having control of your actions and your instincts. And part of that is recognizing that, well, you have a certain level of control, you don't have infinite control. I can't will myself into being younger, for example. I can't will myself into being taller, but I can, within the levels of agency that I've been granted by God, I can operate within that to the best of my ability. And that's what I teach people to do. How can you operate within the given natural structure that you have to achieve the maximum control over what you have been granted as your domain? And that's extremely powerful. And we're not all going to achieve that high level of agency. A lot of people simply don't have the fundamental underlying capacity for it. But I think it's mostly important for those mature members of society, the men and women who will influence the future generations to make their effort to develop that level of agency. Because when people go along going, lie, 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 we want them to come to us and go, hey, but he told me the truth. That guy told me the truth. I'm going to listen to him. Somebody has to speak the truth. And it's very hard to speak the truth when you don't have agency, because you're going to be afraid. You're not going to understand how to speak it without being canceled. I say things that are very controversial. And occasionally I do get canceled, got kicked off of Facebook. But I understand how to spread a message that is incredibly important and valuable without it destroying me. And that's about having agency. People will say, well, why don't you talk about this subject or that subject? And I say, because those subjects, irregardless of what I think about them, are too deep a truth for the current public to understand. And therefore, they should not be talked about publicly yet. Jesus Christ, when he healed the blind man, he didn't just, boom, his eyesight comes back. What did he do? It was slow. There was a process. He was allowed to regain sight, because dumping unnecessary or undigestible information onto a person that they're not ready to handle is not loving. It's cruel. And it is not empathetic to people. If we want people to grow, we have to give them the information that they need at the level that they can digest it. And so that's what I do. And what I give out to the public is surface level stuff. What I give to my clients is deeper. What I give to people in my own life is even deeper. And what I give to my sons is at the deeper level of all, because not every piece of information, every piece of truth needs to be easily available into the public. What does the Bible say? Don't throw your pearls before swine. I'm not saying anyone listening to me is swine, but what it's saying is don't waste your valuable wisdom. And there are times you need to hold some of that back. So there are discussions that will be had in public in the future that cannot be had in public now, because it's too dangerous for the people that want to have those discussions, because there's too many manipulators. We have to address the root cause, manipulation. Once we do that, imagine a population where you can't be manipulated. What kind of discussions we can have, how deep we can dig into the truth, how fast we can evolve as a civilization when we don't have to get past all kinds of preconceptions and bullshit that people have, that they've been programmed to respond in order to shut the truth down. And we can go straight to, this is true. That's something we can't even imagine. It's something I can imagine, because I can do that with my friends. I can do that with the people close to me. We can have, we've had visitors come and join my little group of married men here. And they just listen to the conversation. And at the end they go, my mind is blown. I've never heard anything like this. It's better than a Joe Rogan podcast and a Jordan Peterson lecture and a Stefan Molyneux video and a this and a that all at the same time. And I'm like, well, this is our normal Saturday, Sunday discussion that we have as a group of friends over dinner and enjoy, because we're not manipulated people. We're able to have that level of truth in our lives. And I wish that for everyone.
You have a great quote that I love that says, you don't need to find yourself, you need to build yourself. And I think that agency is built from within. That dominion, that control of yourself, that comes from within. That's not something you find elsewhere. That's not something you go and find yourself, because I think when you go and you go to find yourself from somewhere else, that's when you're opening yourself up to that manipulation.
Absolutely. Well, both Marcus Aurelius and Jesus Christ have a very similar metaphor that they use about the mind being like a home, and that you need to kick out the unwanted guests. And it's used in the context of, your inner demons or whatever. You got to kick out the unwanted guests and put your house in order. Well, that's what we have to do. It's very often not a matter of what we need to take something in that we don't have. It's that we need to get rid of some of the garbage that's in our mind, some of the excess baggage, the unnecessary things. We were created to understand the universe. We were made to understand natural law, God's ways. We were made for this. What's stopping us is the stuff that was put in us by men. And getting that out of our mind, clearing out the bad ideas that we have, and simplifying is going to help us more than taking anything particularly in. Most people are way too addicted to taking in information, and that information only serves to further confuse them. Our ancestors, you go 200 years ago, and most people, aside from the Bible, which was the only commonly available book, read very little. And I'm talking literate people. They'd read the Bible over and over again, but they read very little. Not because they didn't want to, because books were expensive. They were exposed to very little information in their lifetime, so much so that I remember reading that the average 10-year-old was exposed to more information than their great-great-grandparents would have been exposed to in their entire life. More information does not mean more wisdom. And it does not mean a better life. Most of us can't act on a tenth of what we're hearing. And that's on purpose. Too much information creates analysis paralysis, makes us easy to manipulate. If you read a self-help book, or you watch a video like one that you're watching right now, it's not about taking in information. You need to be looking for, how is this going to change my life? If you're watching podcasts for entertainment, frankly, don't go listen to music. Go to listen to some classical music for entertainment, something with no vocals, because that's going to alleviate your brain. That's going to relax your brain. You listen to a podcast, it's overstimulating you. And unless you plan on doing things with the information that you get from the podcast, you're actually decreasing your operational agency. So what I do if I listen to a podcast, or if I listen to read a book, is I take notes, and I come across something that says, do this to get this result. I'm like, oh, damn, I'm going to do that right away. I'll stop reading the book. I'll stop listening to the podcast. I'll take the notes of it, and I will immediately apply it in my life. I'll go, if it's interact with your spouse this way, I'll go try it on my wife. If it's try this with your kids, I'll go try it on my kid. I'll phone a friend. I'll message a friend. If it's, something social, if it's something business, I'll go try it right away. Try it, be active, do something, and come back and go, that worked, or that didn't work. Maybe I did it wrong. Try it a couple of times. If it doesn't work, hey, maybe that book's not so close to reality as you think. Instead of taking in all this knowledge, which is mostly conflicting, we take in all kinds of conflicting knowledge that our mind has no way of synthesizing and harmonizing together. And then we wonder why we have anxiety and wonder why we don't know what to do. Biggest problem with young men today is, what do you want? I don't know. I guess I want to get married and have kids. Do you really? Or is that your default because you don't know what you want to do? Because you don't seem to be moving towards it. So, if you want something, don't you move towards it, right? And we should be looking at that whenever we're taking in any kind of information. What am I going to do with it? What am I going to do with it? Where's the action for me out of this? Where's the takeaway for me to do something? Same when we're giving advice. There needs to be a takeaway. What are you going to do? Look, when you're done watching this video, go do something. Go and look up GSRRM. Read the methods, because it's not just me that talks about this. I'm the first one to publish it in a book. But look up GSRRM, Google it. Look up the methods on which people are manipulated, and right away you're going to make yourself 10%, 20% more immune to manipulation. And if you're already pretty immune, it might be enough to help you push you over that edge where you can't be manipulated anymore. So now you have something to do. You have homework after the video's done.
a place that you're a little bit of an expert and do a lot of coaching in as well is dating in relationships. I think that's another place where there's a lot of manipulation takes place from both sides, and from outside too. There's manipulation of people saying you have to do this to find this partner to get married. You'll find that, your top 10 list of what you must do in order to find a husband or to find a wife. You lead a group called smv4k.com, and I'll put that link in there, and where you talk a lot about sexual market value. What is sexual market value, and what does that have to do with finding a relationship and having that be what you want it to be?
So you have sexual market value and you have marriage market value. Now, the very fact that we talk about value in markets is uncomfortable to a lot of people, because implicit in that is that there's a certain judgment of their value. So if you're listening to this and you can detach yourself emotionally from the concepts, and once you understand the concepts, you can reattach yourself to it, because at some point you want it to have an effect on you. It's going to be a lot easier for you to get the concepts and for you to understand how they work. There are things men want from women and things women want from men. The sexual market is how people get their sexual needs fulfilled. The marriage market is how they get their marriage needs, which includes sex, fulfilled as well. There's some overlap for sure, but it's not one-to-one. There are a lot of women out there who think they're in the marriage market, but they're in the sexual marketplace, because they're willing to have sex outside of marriage. They assume that means the man wants to have a relationship. It's the same how women make friends with a man and then assume that they're just friends, whereas the man's like, no, I want to have sex with you. Isn't that coming next? Because that's how most men think. Yeah, I'm not interested in becoming friends with a woman because I'm married to one. If I want female attention, I got somebody that I can get that attention from. And the rest of the time, I have my male friends, and I am friendly with their wives. They're not my friends in the same way that they are. I have women that I mentor. It's a father figure more than I'm a father figure, not a friend. And so there's a different type of relationship there. But a lot of women, they think they're in the marriage market and they don't understand, why is he not proposing? Or he proposed, but why are we not getting married? What's happening? If you're in a relationship with a man and he's not talking about anything concrete, any kind of concrete commitment, he's not even talking about it, then you're in the sexual marketplace. You are just going to get sex. You're not going to get a relationship. Women don't understand that they can get sex with men that they could never get a relationship with, because men are, not all men, okay, I'm generalizing when I say this, but men are more sexually promiscuous. They don't see it in the same way as women do. Or no, men wish to be more sexually promiscuous. Most men can't be. All women can be. It's kind of funny. We tend to want the thing that's hard. Women want relationships, but men control relationships. Men are the ones that have to say yes to the relationship. Men want sex, but women control sex. Now, fortunately, we want something from each other, and so we each get our needs fulfilled in that way. The problem is when someone thinks they're in a market they're not in. For women, I help them move over to the marriage marketplace. And for men who are in the marriage marketplace, I help them to avoid women who aren't headed in that direction. And I'll tell you something. I don't think everyone should be getting married. And I have clients which they're not interested in marriage. Okay, then how do you have a happy life if you're not going to get married? Because that's 90% of the population. That's probably the best for them. But there is a big chunk of the population historically that didn't get married. And what did they do? We used to have honorable places for them. They could be a nun, they could be a monk, they could defend their people, they could help their sister raise her kids, whatever it happened to be. There was an honorable place for them in society. And now we don't have an honorable place for these people. And so we have a huge problem coming up with people that are outside of the marriage market, that are not really doing well in the sexual marketplace, who are frustrated and rapidly aging, and in many cases in terrible physical condition too. And this is going to be a big humanitarian problem over the next generation. What do we do with these people? And it's nice to say, well, it's their own problem, let them suffer. if you have a large enough group of people who have no investment in the future, they will work to destroy and undermine our future in ways that we can't even imagine and are completely irrational to us, but make sense to them when they have no future at stake. So this
I
is
think
why I talk about it so much, the sexual marketplace and the marriage marketplace.
I think society is almost in some ways trying to create those people.
Yes.
Yeah, there are people who marriage isn't for them. That's perfectly fine. The Apostle Paul is probably the greatest example of that from Scripture. But our society nowadays in 2022 almost wants to create people who don't want to get married, don't want to have kids. And you see this push that marriage and family is this horrible thing and it's this bad thing. It's going to keep you from achieving your dreams. I saw a commercial the other day where there were these two sisters, and the one sister was married and had 10 kids or whatever and looked completely miserable. Then they panned over to the other sister who's, single and living free and all this stuff. And it creates this image that marriage and family is this horrible thing. Why has that happened? Why has society made it so that, marriage and having a family is seen as a hindrance to achieving your dreams?
Did you know that most single women live below the poverty line?
No.
Most single women will never have enough money to retire. They're going to work until the day they die, which will probably be 15 years younger than women used to live back when more women were mothers and had children. There is terrible statistics connected with being a single woman. Yes, there are some women that escape that. There are some very intelligent women that make a lot of money and they don't need to get married. They don't need a man to look after them. They're a very tiny minority. And women will look at that tiny minority because, frankly, women are easier to delude than men. As we can see from the Garden of Eden, Satan did not approach Adam, he approached Eve. Easier to manipulate and trick. And so women will look at that 1 out of 100 women that was successful without a man and go, I can do that. Now, if they actually met the woman, they'd probably go, no, I can't do that. I'm not her. Oh man, I can't believe how she did that. But what happens is that broken people are easy to manipulate, which means their vote is controllable, which means you can count on it. On top of that, women are great workers. They work fairly hard. You can underpay them. You can abuse them. You can treat them like crap. You can give them responsibilities that you don't ever give them promotion for. I wouldn't do this, but this is what all the big corporations do.
Right.
And you can basically just suck them dry for everything you can think of. The wage gap is a gap mostly because women are lousy at advocating for themselves in the workplace. This is why they get up, they want to make laws about it because most women are not capable of advocating for themselves individually. So they want to make it as a group, which is, women have a tendency towards group think and group activities. That's fine. But there is no law that's going to change the fact that they're not good at negotiating on their own behalf. But women who have a husband, my wife, she works at a private school about 20 hours a week. She enjoys being there at the private school with the other teachers. All the teachers are mothers of the children. It's basically a bunch of women working to educate their kids and getting paid for it at the same time, cooperating together. A lot of them are her friends. She can quit anytime she wants. So she goes in there and she's like, they offer her an amount of money. I'm like, ask for 50% more. And she's like, oh, I don't know if they'll pay that. I'm like, and if they don't, who cares? Stay home. And so she can go and negotiate on her behalf and say, yeah, I'm going to leave early. What are they going to do about it? She's a really competent person and she doesn't have any fear of being fired. Whereas the women who are completely on their own tend to not only not have a husband, they don't have any social network. If something happened to me today, I got friends around who'd look after my kids and my wife. Men, we socially network, we insure each other. Blood brother is a thing. Nobody ever heard of a blood sister. We mutually insure each other. We protect each other. We watch each other's back. Women aren't aligned that way. They usually have a husband to do that. And in the absence of a husband, they become completely atomized. And then they're in a very fragile position when things happen to them. No children to look after them in their old age, no husband. and no social network. And the reason is because people in this vulnerable position are very easy to manipulate. Is all you have to do is offer there's no way out for them if someone doesn't give them a way out. And the government can say, we're going to give you a way out. We're going to take care of you, but you got to vote our way.
So again, it's almost
Guaranteed
the
voters.
opposite of what they say they're doing. They say that this independent woman is less subject to manipulation. It isn't controlled by a man, or isn't all these things. When actually, when they are that, they are much more easily controllable.
Yeah, empowering women actually takes away their power. Every government program does exactly the opposite of what its stated objectives are. You know, we have the departments of education, which made the education in the US significantly worse than before there was a federal Bureau of Education. We have the Affordable Care Act, which made healthcare more expensive, less affordable. Every government program works in the opposite way of what it was intended to work as. And it goes back to the, you know, the evil inversion type of thing. You know, they want to invert everything. Whatever is good will become bad, and whatever is bad will be called good. And this is how they operate. And this is partly how you know it's a manipulation. Here, we're going to give you free stuff. Well, you know, I understand children falling for that free candy, but we're adults. We shouldn't be falling for free candy. Right. We need to understand free stuff means they're going to take stuff from us. You know, it's the reverse of whatever they say. We're going to give you some new rights and freedoms, means they're going to restrict some of our other rights and freedoms instead. And they've done that with women. They've promised them free candy, and they ended up getting in a van with some stranger, and they're gone now. A lot of these women, it's terrible what's happened to them. I have had women in their early 40s, mid 40s come to me and go, I think it's too late to get married. I've been trying for 20 years. I did everything they told me to do, and it didn't work out. And I'm thinking, okay, what'd you do? And just like, mind you, this is a woman who's still beautiful in her 40s. She says, well, I studied real hard in school. I got a good degree. I got a great job. I made a lot of money. I rose to the top of my profession, and I saved all my money up, and I became wealthy and bought my own house. And I still couldn't find a husband. And I said, if you were a man, you would have found a wife, no problem. But they told you they lied to you. They told you the opposite of what you should do. And they set you up for what would make a man successful, not what would make a woman successful. And she was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. I've been called a misogynist so many times, but you would not believe how much it hurts my heart to see these women that have been lied to. And sometimes people, you know, they see me get angry about these lies, and they're like, oh, you're a misogynist, you want to control women. I'm like, no, I have seen the results of the path you're on, and it's not good. And I want to help you.
So how do we fight against that? Because it just seems to be coming from every direction that is the path that women should take. So how do we fight against that narrative? Well, first of all, we have
to recognize we can't save everybody. Okay, so we're going to have this is part of having agency, is understanding that we're not omnipotent. We have a locus of control we have a sphere of control, over which we have influence, or sphere of influence, We can more or less control ourselves, although we're imperfect, and, you know, we don't always have 100% control over ourselves, but we have a lot of influence over people in real life. And especially mature men like you and I, we are out there having discussions with people. You know, you're not fighting the porn industry by shooting pornographers and burning porn studios. Okay. Right. Like, and if you think about it, that might work, but the consequences, the backlash of that would be more destructive to what you want to accomplish than you'd actually get benefits out of it. The cost is too high. What you're doing is you're helping people become immune to the manipulation and the propaganda that goes along with pornography, so that they can get control over themselves. You're giving people an opportunity to get self-control. And that's what we have to do. We have to look to the people in our own lives. Because I'm a public figure, you are too. Our reach is extended a little bit. But all of us everybody's within reach of some mature man and woman that can help with this. And those women who are happy, successful mothers need to go out there and say, I'm a happy, successful mother. I enjoy raising kids. This gives me pleasure. The very best women in general are so agreeable that they don't get on social media and thump their chest about how amazing their life is. That they're just too humble for that. They don't do that. And I understand that. And I'm not saying we should send all our women off to social war. That's probably a terrible idea. But it would be great if they could do that. And we need to raise our daughters and our sons to understand that for most people, marriage and children is the path to happiness. And if not, you got to contribute. We owe our ancestors something. We can pay that through having and raising great children. We can pay that through, moving our civilization forward in other ways. Isaac Newton had no children, but he moved society forward in further discovering natural law and God's and God's creations. He dug into it in a way that other men couldn't. If he hadn't done it, who would have? Maybe nobody for a long time. And so there's always a place for the man who doesn't, or woman who doesn't want to get married. The problem is there's no place for the hedonist, for the person who says, my life is all about me and whatever makes me happy. That is imposing a cost on everyone else. We like to think that this radical individualism is a manipulative meme that has penetrated Western society to the point where all we see is the individual. Yes, we are individuals and we do have a certain separation from the group, but we are cells of a whole. We are part of a whole. And what we do has real effects on everyone around us. I'm reminded of that every time I hear about someone that kills themselves, for example. There are real effects to everyone, second and third and fourth order effects to people they've never even met. There's also big effects when we choose to live in any way we choose to live. It's not, get the government out of my bedroom. It's like everybody in your society is affected by your choices. Doesn't mean we have the right to order each other around, but it does mean we have a personal responsibility to behave in a way that does not impose costs on our neighbors. That includes having children and raising them right. If we're raising a bunch of delinquents, we're imposing a cost on our neighbors. And if we're men like me, I have not only the ability to raise my own kids, I have a desire to father farther than the possible number of kids I could have. I need a harem to have that many kids. I have the desire to father more people. And so I'm out there fathering people in the public. I'm giving that father energy out there. What do we call it when you have a bunch of fathers guiding and directing society and giving that fatherly energy out there? It's the patriarchy.
Right.
That's what the patriarchy is. Men like you and men like me who care about society and who, like fathers, go out there and persuade, not using violence and manipulation, but persuade society to do what's good for them. Just like fathers persuade their children to do what's good for them. And that's the solution. We need to reestablish a benevolent, persuasive, and effective patriarchy. And it's going to be a volunteer-based thing. Like some people are going to be out, you're out, you don't get our protection either. You don't want to listen, that's okay. You don't listen over there. Over here with us, we're going to be safe and we're going to listen to each other.
And I want to speak to that a little bit and shift gears here. We talked a little bit about single women. I want to talk to single men, because even though I'm married, I have kids, and I do a lot of my porn coaching and teaching based on marital relationships and the damage it does to marriages. But about half of my clients and a good number of my audience are young single men. So what's your advice to them in this environment where the patriarchy is this horrible thing and you're trying to control women and down with the patriarchy and all men are misogynists and all men are sexist and everything else? What's your advice to a young man that's in his late teens, early 20s, that's trying to navigate through all this and is being bombarded from all sides that masculinity is terrible?
First of all, they need to understand that they are not yet part of the patriarchy. The patriarchy is the rule of the older, mature men, and they're not there yet. They need to place themselves under a patriarch. Find older men that can mentor you. Place yourself under the a patriarchy, and allow it to mature you as a man. And that requires a level of humility. You need to recognize that you need to grow, that you need to make changes. And, maybe it's a little embarrassing because some of those changes you probably should have made in your childhood and teenage years, but you never had a sufficient amount of fathering. You may have had a father, but you didn't have a sufficient amount of fathering to help you do those things. I meet guys in their 20s who sound like 12-year-olds and act like 12-year-olds, and they have a job, but otherwise they act like 12-year-olds. And it's not their fault completely. They were raised that way, and now they're coming to me to fix it. That's why I don't criticize them, because they're on the path to fixing it. Get under a patriarch, start getting mentored. Ideally, you won't have to go online and hire someone like me. Ideally, you'll find someone local to you. That would be best, because there's nothing beats being mentored in person. People who actually live near me, who I mentor, the connection we can have is better, because we need physical connection with other people. You need to be able to put your hand around a guy who's suffering and say, man, it's okay. Everything's going to be fine. Pat on the back, handshake, all this stuff is important for bonding, and bonding is important for trust, which is required to be a great mentor. But you're going to have to grow up, basically. Grow up and you'll be fine. That's what you need. You need to grow up and you'll be fine, whatever path that takes you. And that might mean you marry and have kids. It might mean that you do something else to contribute to your people, to your culture, to your society, however you're viewing that. And you're putting the cart before the horse when you worry about the problems of the world. You got your own problems to deal with first. Fix that, and then please join the patriarchy so that we can fix the problems of the world. That's our job. You don't ask your dad every day when he comes home, did you make enough money? You're a kid and you're asking your dad every day, man, did you make enough money to pay the bills? You don't need to be asking us about fixing the problems of the world. You need to be getting ready to join us so that we can work together on this. And you don't have to be an old man. Lots of mature men in their 30s, but you have to have lived a bit in order to get to that point. Historically, most societies would not consider you a man until you were 30. You had man responsibilities. You might have to fight to defend your tribe at 15, but you wouldn't be taken seriously in decision making until you're in your 30s. And even then, historically, I'm mostly German background, and in the Germanic tribes, you had to be accepted into a Männerbund. Otherwise, you just weren't taken seriously. And if you weren't accepted into a Männerbund by the time you're 27, you would never be considered a man. You'd be stuck permanently. You'd end up as an outcast of society. You need to get into that mentorship with an older man. You need to go join a brotherhood of some sort. There's all kinds of brotherhoods out there. Go find one and join. You don't have to find the best one. Go find one, join, start on your process. You can always say, hey, this one's not for me, and go find another one. But get into that environment. You're not going to make it on your own.
I think this conversation has kind of almost come full circle. You said at the very beginning, we're the most underfathered generation in history. And I think that's where the root problem comes down to, is not having the patriarchy. And again, we kind of, beating a dead horse again, but it's the opposite of what society is trying to do. They're saying the patriarchy is bad. The patriarchy is actually what we really need. And these young men need fathers. They need these mentors, these good influences in their lives to help them to become the men that they want to be and they're capable of being, so that they're not a bunch of 30-year-old, 12-year-olds, which is a lot of the men I coach come to me that way, so that they can become the men they want to be, so that they can become the husbands and fathers they should be and can be.
Yeah, the same people that say the patriarchy is abusive cheer when a police officer's horse steps on some protester's head, because they don't happen to like the protest. The patriarchy is an alternative form of government. This is why the current governments do not like it. It is an existential threat to their power structure. We do not need police to sort out our problems when we can go to an elder in the community and go, look, me and my friend are having a problem here. Can you help us sort it out? And we trust him sufficiently for him to mediate and judge between us, as we used to do throughout most of history. Police is a relatively new concept. When we have a patriarchy, we have protection for women and children. You know, a woman is not alone with her husband. If her husband's abusive, she's got brothers, she's got a father, she's got uncles. I have a friend, he was raised in Serbia before the Second World War, and he says, we didn't have any domestic violence in my area. He said, because he said, if you beat my sister, I'd give you one warning. I'd beat you up and I'd give you one warning. The second time you did it, you'd go out to the woods and never come back. So he said, it just didn't happen. And if someone was punished that way, there was no family revenge because their family was embarrassed that he had to be disciplined. Historically, generally, the patriarchy is more about protecting women and children and young men rather than exploiting them. Whereas the system we have now is all about exploitation. There's a reason that every government program turns out the opposite of the way it's intended, is because it's all there to exploit us. And if they came out and said that in the beginning, yeah, we're going to exploit you. Hope you like it. Everyone would turn against it. It wouldn't work. So they got to lie to us in the beginning. Whereas, you know, and what are you going to do? You know, if you're Canadian, you're going to go knock on Justin Trudeau's door, wherever he's hiding out, whatever bunker he's in, and say, I don't like what you're doing. You better stop. When you're living under a patriarchy, you are within arm's reach of the people that are running your community. You know, you're within arm's reach of the government that you have, the governing body that's there. And because it's not all the power invested in a small group, it's spread out between all men. And because eventually if you're a man and you're mature, you're going to get in there too. The worst comes to worst, you wait a little while till you get in there and then you solve the problems that bothered you when you were younger. What happens is it's very hard to corrupt because you have to corrupt literally every single man. So you know what they did? They sent the men from the patriarchy off to die in the World War I. And lo and behold, it didn't kill enough of them. Let's do this again, World War II. And this is why that's what crushed the body of men who protected women, children, and young men in society. And when they were dead or traumatized and couldn't raise their own sons to take their place, we lost that protection in society. And we've been being victimized by the government ever since. And we have to rebuild that. It's been a few generations. It's time to rebuild.
No, this has been an incredible conversation. Most of my audience is young men. What's your message to them to find their agency, to reduce the manipulation? I want to give you the floor and let you speak directly to them.
Thank you. Look, guys, they can't manipulate you if you don't consent to it. The first thing you need to do is say, I will no longer be manipulated, and stop consenting to it. Then you need to go and put yourself under the direction of a benevolent older man who's going to help mentor you. And that means you're going to have humility, and it means you're going to have to provide some form of value to that man. Help him with his projects, work under the man. Maybe you get a job working for someone who can mentor you, whatever. You're going to have a reciprocal win-win relationship there. Do that and start to grow up. Become the man you can be. The world needs you. Your people need you to turn into the man you can be. It's been too many generations of men who didn't grow up. Let it end with you. Be the man that your father or grandfather couldn't be, and finish the process. You can do it. It is possible. And if you really need help, contact me. If I can't help you, I'll put you in touch with someone that can.
No, I want to thank you again for joining me. This has been an awesome conversation. Where can people go to learn more about you? If they're interested in your services as a coach, where can they go to find out more about that?
Well, you can look me up on Twitter at noahrevoy.com, or at noahrevoy, on Twitter. And in my header, there's a link to book a coaching session. You can also type in my name, noahrevoy.com. It'll take you to the SMV4K website for now. I'm about to update to a new website where it's under my own name. And then you'll be able to book sessions from there. But the best is to go to Twitter and book off of that. Even if you don't have a Twitter account, you can still access Twitter. You just won't be able to comment, of course. And feel free to DM me. If you want to DM me and ask a question about coaching, ask a question about, even a lot of people just ask me simple questions on Twitter. I help them with their problem and they don't need to go through a coaching session. If you have a simple question, ask me. If you have a complex question, I'll tell you that's too much for, to deal with in the DMs, and let's have a session. I'm very open to people reaching out to me, but I am about to release a book, and along with that book is going to come a lot more publicity. I'm writing it with a very experienced ghostwriter who's helped me take my very complex ideas and bring them down into a format that's for the general public. But that's going to make a huge increase in the amount of input and attention I get, which means I'm going to have to change how I connect with people. So you have a couple of months before that book releases. And if you wait too long, you may not be able to get a hold of me too easily. So get on that soon, please.
Noah, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you, Timothy.
This has been an episode of the Into the Wilderness podcast. This is Timothy Regal. Thank you for listening. For additional content and to learn more about Into the Wilderness, visit www.intothewildernessblog.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and all other social media at Timothy Regal. TimothyReigle. If you're like me and many other men, you've struggled with porn. I was addicted for over 15 years and thought I would never break free. But through accountability, hard work, and never giving up, I found freedom from porn and sex addiction. If you're fighting the same battle, know there is hope. You can defeat this, but you cannot do it alone. That's why I offer one-on-one coaching to walk beside you in your battle. I'll provide personal guidance, support, and encouragement, and most importantly, accountability to keep you on track and help you reach your goals. So if you're ready to finally quit porn for good, if you're ready to put in the hard work, and if you're ready to finally take control of your life back, click on the link in the show notes to go to www.intothewildernessblog.com or DM me on Twitter or other social media to get started in your path to freedom today.